Hey guys, Tucker here, co-host of the Portland Real Estate Podcast. Before we get into this week's show, I wanted to let you know that we're currently looking for more projects. So for any of you guys that listen to the show that may be an agent or otherwise that have a property that you're looking to sell, we'd love to hear from you. Obviously, we're looking to purchase properties that are maybe not best suited for the retail market, or maybe they need to be redeveloped. So we do renovations and we do new construction, so we could buy an existing home that maybe it smells like cigarette smoke, maybe it hasn't been updated in decades, maybe it's got some functional issues, some problems like that, or maybe it's just in an area that is best suited to take the house down, partition the lot, maybe build a couple new homes, or just build one new home in its place, and anything in between. So if you guys out there in listener land have anything that would be best suited selling to a development company like ours, we'd love to hear from you. You can go to our website, which is ttmdevelopmentcompany.com, and when you go there, there's a Contact Us tab. Click on that, and you can send us a message, and we'll get back to you shortly thereafter. We'd love to hear from any of you guys out there that have a property like this, and hopefully we can do a deal together. This is the Portland Real Estate Podcast, your number one place for anything you need to know about the Portland real estate market, along with in-depth interviews from our local real estate industry experts. Now, without further ado, here are our hosts, Tucker Merrihew from TTM Development Company and Steve Nassar from Premier Property Group. All right, everybody, welcome back. We are here for our first episode of 2019. I know we're a few weeks late into the year. It's the Portland Real Estate Podcast. It's episode 92, and it's episode 1 of 2019. We're back, but we're back with a bang. We've got a fantastic guest. But before we intro him with a very nice drum roll, I want to welcome my co-host, Steve Nassar. What's up, Steve-O?
Hey, Tucker. Happy New Year's. I know it's a little belated, as you acknowledged, but I think, as you mentioned, our listeners are going to be very excited about the guest we have. It's probably one of my favorite guests from last year. And I think you and I talked offline about that. It was just he's such an informative guest. One of few that actually has a microphone in front of him and is very familiar with podcasts because he does one of his own. And he'll mention that here later. But welcome back to the show, Kurt von Wasmuth.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to hang out with you guys again.
For those who are not familiar with Kurt, remind our listeners who you are and what your position is.
I am the president and CEO of the Regional Multiple Listing Service, lovingly referred to as RMLS.
The biggest in the state of Oregon?
Yes, we serve the majority of the state of Oregon and a large portion of Southwest Washington.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So it goes without saying, he is an integral part of the process of being a realtor in that they are the data system source of so much we do, a technology source of so much we do. One of the main reasons we wanted to bring Kurt on, I mean, amongst many, I'll give our listeners a little sneak preview of what the show's format's going to be. Kurt sent out via RMLS, but right. Kurt was obviously a part of the process. Early in 2019, it was January 7th, actually, I saved the email, and we're going to use it today as a bullet point outline. A wonderful top 10 things that were accomplished by RMLS in 2018. I remember when I received this email, it was early morning. I was actually at the gym, and I got in. I was glancing through here, and I'm like, wow, you guys knocked it out of the park in 2018, Kurt. I mean, any one of these several projects is a massive undertaking, and yet you guys accomplished many of them. And we're going to talk about them one by one. We're going to get updates on some of them, including the coming soon, no showings, the CenturyLock conversion, and more. We're also going to talk with Kurt about 2019. It's hard for me to imagine that after accomplishing so much in 2018 that you guys are going to rest on your laurels and don't have a bunch of great stuff planned for this year. And then we're going to talk a little bit about Kurt and RMLS's unique perspective into our market. And one of them, well, there's a couple of reasons they have a unique perspective. First of all, whenever Tucker and I do a market update, I mean, we print out and are looking at RMLS data. They are the source of that data. So there's obviously that component. But one thing those market updates don't show that is very interesting is subscriber numbers. How many agents are joining RMLS and how many are leaving RMLS? Because I think that can be very telling of a market change. And we have past history to gather data from and compare. In other words, and we'll go into that, as markets cycle, where does user growth plateau in relation to a trough or a peak of a cycle? So without further ado, let's go into some of these accomplishments of 2018, Kurt. We're going to put one in here that was not on the list, Kurt, that is really fascinating. We're going to have you chat about it. It's Upstream. Tell us what Upstream is and tell us what you know about it, Kurt.
So way back in like 2015 or 16, the largest brokers in the nation started to get frustrated because some of their smaller MLSs that they have to deal with simply weren't willing to provide the data that they wanted in a timely fashion or in the format that they wanted or any number of problems. Keep in mind, there's like 770 MLSs in this country. So if you're serving several states, that's a ton of MLSs you have to deal with. Florida alone has 20-something MLSs. So in some cases, that can be very frustrating. So the largest brokerages and franchises got together and they dreamed up this thing called Upstream. And Upstream was the idea that agents should enter listings into this product called Upstream. And then the listings could be doled out to the MLSs and the portals and software manufacturers and everything from there, rather than relying on these 700 MLSs. Now, if you're a member of a brokerage that only belongs to 2 or 3 MLSs, it's not that big a deal. But when you belong to a ton of them, this can be a huge time savings. And in a surprising twist, RMLS in Portland, Oregon was chosen as the poster child. We were the MLS that Upstream wanted to work with. I think mainly because we build our own system, and that's important because it means we're competent and we can do what they were asking for. But it's also we're easy to work with. Like we've worked with these people before. 2018 was sort of the rubber hitting the road. There was a grand total of 2 listings that entered RMLS Web from Upstream, and then it sort of fizzled after those 2 listings. And that was in the summer, too. So that was in, I think, May those came in, and we never saw any more. And just sort of as a quick wrap-up, they have decided they won't be working with RPR as their vendor anymore, which is an NAR-owned company. They have chosen another vendor, but have not announced who that vendor is. And so, we're just sort of in a holding pattern when it comes to Upstream. It's a huge nationwide project. We were proud to have helped out in any way that we could, and we'll see what comes of it.
So were they going to do like a test run with you guys? Was that why they chose you?
Yeah, that's exactly right. We were the first ones to go through. Now, they've sort of pivoted since then, and they decided that building a listing input module maybe isn't the best way to do it. And instead, they're just sucking data out of MLSs and organizing it differently for the largest brokers. But for us, that's exactly what we were. We were the first test market. The second one was supposed to be Silicon Valley down in California. But 2 listings and out in 2018.
Well, so I guess Kurt, it said something good about you guys that they decided they want to work with you to test it.
Yeah, I think that's a real testament. I mean, there's a nation of MLSs to choose from out there, and they chose us.
Yeah, interesting. So, Kurt, they're a private company, not an association.
No, they're fully privately owned. They have their own CEO. And in 2019, they will be funded by broker dollars. But in 2018, 17, 16, they were funded by the National Association of Realtors.
And their thought process was almost kind of the reverse. You take an IDX, and they are fed from from an MLS.
Right.
They were kind of the opposite end of that. They're like, you put into us first, right, and then we'll feed the MLSs.
Right.
Which doesn't make a ton of sense for us because, it can. I guess if you're doing Salem and Portland, those 2, or, right, you get into Battleground and Northwest MLS, you might want to cross. But I have heard stories, and you mentioned Silicon Valley was where they're going to go next. I have heard stories where there are 4 or 5 different MLSs within a tiny little area.
Oh, and absolutely.
So the idea would be you put it in this one place and boom, it's in all 4 or 5 of those, and it's just an efficiency.
Yeah,
factor.
absolutely. There are at least one, I think probably more like three situations where MLSs are right across the street from each other. Like there's so much competition that you could throw a rock and hit another MLS.
Interesting. It kind of reminds me a little bit on the commercial side of LoopNet. Isn't that what it's called?
Mm-hmm.
LoopNet. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Well, let's move on to number 9 on the bullet points of accomplishments for 2018. Kurt, MLS aligned. Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, so this is my baby. I love this. So there were 5 of us at dinner one night back in 2016, maybe 17. And we're talking RMLS in Portland, Oregon, Jim Harrison in Silicon Valley, Matt Consalvo in Arizona, Brad Bielke in Utah, and Chris Carrillo in Wisconsin. And we were, you get 5 MLS CEOs together and they all start chatting about the pains of what they're working on. All of us were struggling with our CRM. I think the whole world is struggling with CRM right now. You've got, a ton of things that we're all working on at exactly the same time. And it occurred to us, there's literally no chance that I'm going to be competing with Utah at any point, or Wisconsin, or Arizona, or Silicon Valley. And if none of us are ever going to be in a position where we're competing with each other, well, then why aren't we helping each other out? Why aren't we cooperating? And it sort of started as this pie in the sky idea. And in 2018, it really coalesced into a company called MLS Aligned, LLC. And it's 5 MLSs that are working together on a myriad of different projects. And I think in 2019, you're going to start seeing sort of reaping the benefits of competing with other MLSs. Right now, we have, if you use an Android smartphone, we have an app in the Google Play Store that is just the RMLS app. You just type in RMLS. It's in beta, so don't anybody expect perfection. But that is the first thing that we get from 5 MLSs cooperating with each other. And there's going to be a ton more stuff coming out. We've created the world's first shared database. So a database that has, well, it's not really a database. It's an API that allows a vendor to access all 5 of our databases with one query. So if you think in your mind, be thinking of like software that does like a statistical report or maybe like flyers. So you don't need a ton of data. You need to write a query, get some information and get it back. And what we've done is we've written an API where these vendors can hit one system and get data from all of us. So it doesn't matter if you're doing a flyer in Arizona or Wisconsin or Portland, you just submit the query, data comes back, and you're done. It was sort of proof of concept of what could happen when 5 MLSs start working together.
Wow. And they're not geographically located closely together, right?
No. Yeah, Milwaukee, Wisconsin is pretty far away from Milwaukee, Oregon.
So I hear, and I hear they don't make Harley Davidsons in Milwaukee, Oregon, from what I've heard.
That's true.
So it's more. It has nothing to do with by being closely together geographically. We want to work together. It's more about you're over there. We're doing the same thing. What are you doing that's working? Here's what we're doing, and let's join forces. And you mentioned competing with MLSs, so you view it as like, hey, by getting the help from Milwaukee, you might be able to overpower, is that a good word? Some of the Southern Oregon MLSs or the Central Oregon MLS.
I mean, it's certainly our goal at some point to be statewide. And honestly, if cooperating with 4 other MLSs gives us a lift, well, then let's go ahead and do it. The real lift comes from the fact that these MLSs are all like-minded MLSs, meaning that we all have technology departments. We all write something. So Portland and Utah writes their own front end. We develop our own system. Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Arizona, they write their own tax system. So we do a little bit of tax work, but not like they do. Holy moly, they've got a huge system. And Silicon Valley, and they're writing software all over the place. They have lots of software that they sell. So it was really the fact that we were all like-minded MLSs who had the same sort of skill sets that we could leverage off of each other.
Okay, so you just made me think of something, Kurt. Are the MLSs in Silicon Valley, do they have a tremendous advantage just because of where they're located and the talent pool near them?
LinkedIn and Google The prices are through the roof. So do they have the talent? Yeah, absolutely. It also makes it a little bit tougher for them to compete to get the top talent because everybody's making outrageous sums down there.
Gotcha. Good. Interesting point. Okay. Drum roll. Tell us about that, Kurt.
Every year we put on we put on what we call the summit and trade fair. So it's an opportunity for people to get credit hours and an opportunity for us to sort of allow people to wander around and look at booths and what opportunities are available for them. If you went back in time, so I started running this back in 1999 was the first year I ran it, and it was entirely different than it is today. It used to be a giant, and with the popularity of the internet, that giant room full of vendors has shrunk, and we've had to switch the focus from exposure to software packages and phones and cars and stuff like that, down to the focus is now education. And the trade show itself is it's significantly smaller, but it's also less impactful. So it's more an opportunity for people to get together, sit in on some classes that they might not have been exposed to otherwise, and get some credit hours.
Yeah, no, I've been to a couple of these. They're great. Aren't they downtown in the Lloyd District area?
Yeah, so they move around a little bit. I think we will be in the Lloyd District again this year in 2019. Back in the day, it used to be at the convention center, so we try and keep it around there. But one year we held it at the forestry center by the zoo, cool, so it moves around. Yeah. And this is the spring one. RMLS also does one in the fall, though I doubt people in Portland would be interested because it moves around. It could be in Brookings, it could be in Pendleton, it could be in Florence. It's all over.
Awesome. Okay, so moving along to number 7, open house broker tour improvements. Tell us about that.
Yeah, there's not an awful lot to say there. We just changed the way that the open houses show up. You can get to open houses from a listing, that sort of thing. It's a usability improvement inside of RMLS web.
I'm not familiar with it, Kurt. So take a second and tell me as a user, because I get the value in it. Say my client calls me up and says, "Hey, Steve, I want to see some open houses in Lake Oswego. You're out of town. Tell me where I should go." Is that what it does? And I can put in a geographic area and it tells me all the open houses? What does it do?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Same
and
for
this one, we added the ability, to add an open house or add open house information when your listing is still in progress and that type of thing.
Got it.
It's a part of the usability oversight that we're doing into RMLS Web to try and make it easier to use.
You mean as a coming soon or in progress, you could then put it out there for other agents to see that there's about to be an open house in a week or two.
That's right. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Good. Yeah. A lot of these improvements, for busy agents like myself, they sneak under the radar, and I think it's valuable at a time like this for myself to learn.
Sure. Yeah.
And maybe our listeners too. Yeah. RMLS training, number 6. What do you got here?
So because of the year, like if you look at the enhancements that we did in 2018, especially when it comes to the one we're going to talk about later, coming soon, we had record number of classes that were taught. So if you look at the numbers, we're through the roof, not only in the number of people that we trained in 2018, but the number of presentations that we did, the number of geographic locations that we visited. It was an incredibly busy year for our trainers at RMLS, and not just for our trainers. It expanded to everyone. We had our rules and regs folks going out giving presentations. I was swamped. I was out there giving presentations. We were busy, and we accomplished a ton in 2018, which is sort of it's an overall trend of this entire list here. You mentioned it earlier. 2018 was a monster year for RMLS. We got a lot done. And a lot of what we got done, this is a sort of teaser for later. A lot of what we got done, no one knows about. It's planting seeds for what's coming up in 2019.
Ooh, gotcha. And I'm excited to hear about that. One little plug I'm going to put in here, guys. When I first got into real estate, RMLS is probably one of the most important tools, if not the most important tools we use. There's a few zip forms, the forms, some of the other components, but I was playing around with it, and then I finally saw the trainings, and I think at this point, gosh, I went to the Vancouver office for some reason. There was some reason I went to the Vancouver office. I think it's just what happened to be the scheduling. But I ended up going to 3 or 4 of the trainings. One's focused on listing load. One was focused on buyers and prospect profiles. One was focused on CMA profiles or something. I forget exactly. And I left there just, my head had wrapped around this powerful tool. And ever since then, Kurt, I kid you not, whenever I'm talking to a brand new agent, I tell them, do not try to figure it out on your own. And don't ask me any questions. Go to those 3 or 4 trainings and then come to me for, the fine, and this is team members and right. Other agents that I encounter. And then I'll give you those higher level questions. But it is such a great foundation of knowledge. So I would re-echo that to any newer agents out there. Go to the RMLS training right out of the gate. The sooner you go to it, the sooner you'll be hitting the ground running with the ability to understand and use the most powerful tool a realtor needs to have.
Thank you. We appreciate the kind words. That means a lot to us. But to be honest, we get such a small percentage of our subscribers. We've got a huge number of subscribers out there. A small percentage go to our classes. So if you're listening to this podcast and you want an edge over your competitors, take the training. It'll help.
Yeah. And there's something, we live in a day and age where people want to do everything online and at home. And I'm telling you that you'll absorb it so much more effectively in person, asking questions, having your computer there. They're showing you what to do. It's really, really great stuff. So, okay, we're coming on a big one. We're down to drum roll number 5, showing time.
That was a good drum roll.
Yeah, he is good at that. Talk to us about showing time, Kurt.
So I know that if I remember correctly, and I think I do, you are very excited about showing time coming out. Showing time is basically organizes the business of showings. It allows people ahead of time to say, look, I have some buyers, they want to see the house between this time and this period. And it allows that listing agent to respond and say, yeah, that works for me. Let's go ahead and do it. Or no, the owner's going to be home, or for whatever reason that doesn't work out and we need to reschedule that one. It's a little bit more of an organized approach to showings. Now, there are geographic regions in this country that have had showing time or showing suite or, any of the showing type software for years. And Portland and Oregon and Southwest Washington always sort of felt like, culturally, that's not the way we do it. We just kind of want to call people. And so the release of showing time has been incredibly popular with some of our subscribers and less so with others. The most common call to our help desk is, how do I shut this thing off? It confuses me. I don't know how to do it. But those people that are using it and using it effectively love it. Yeah.
I'll tell you, Kurt, I'm not using it. Now, keep in mind, and that's not me purposefully. I have a team, and I have two co-lists and two assistants.
Right.
And they just, change is hard. And
it is.
I'd love to sit down. I honestly haven't. I've a couple times we've brought it up, and I think we're turning it off most of the time. And part of it is too, it's one of those technologies that even if we turn it on, if the other agents aren't using it, what's the point, right? And vice versa. If I'm using it and I want to use it and the other agent has it turned off. So it's one of those tools that I think it's almost like there has to be a synchronized education of sorts. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, and that's the $1 million question. How do you do it so that, and it will then start to snowball as more and more people use it and like it, then it will take off. I guess an analogy I would use is like a video phone, right? Like if in the 90s you had a video phone and no one else had a video phone, well, who are you going to use it with, right?
Yeah, what good did it do you?
And it's and then if there's 2 people that have it, well, yeah, you and that person are talking, but it's still limited. It's not until the masses suddenly have it, that it starts to take off. So,
well, and I've talked to my counterparts around the country that have introduced this long before we did. And they said it takes years. I mean, it takes a long time for that culture to change. And that's really what it is. It's sort of like, people, this is the way we do things. And then slowly over time, some users start demanding, no, if you want to do a showing, you have to do it through this. And that number grows and grows and grows. And then boom, you hit critical mass. And now
there you go. I think that is how it will work. And I think it will take years. Not to mention that you rolled it out at a time where other big stuff was coming out that we were all trying to figure out.
Yeah, we would like to refer to that time period as 2018. Like there was always something big going on.
Yeah.
Do you talk with other? So like you obviously are in communication with other RMLSs, because that was my question. Yes. Do you then bounce kind of improvement ideas off of other ones that maybe have some of these features, and then get feedback of like, okay, just actually opt it fully and understand it before then you decide, okay, it's worth the time and effort to do the coding and deployment in our own market here, and you guys probably have a sit-in and do an aye and a nay as to whether or not we move forward with it. Are you utilizing these other RMLSs and your relationships with them to kind of help determine where you're putting your efforts for the improvement?
Yeah, absolutely. So in this one in particular, I called because we've had, I don't want to drum this to death, but we've had the showing companies, all of the software opportunities come to us for years. Back when I was the liaison for the technology committee, we saw them for the first time in like 98, 99, sometime around there. But as soon as this one got critical mass and the tech committee was like, okay, it's time. This has enough features in it. They're willing to work with us. They're willing to weave it into the MLS. The first thing I did was call my friend Stuart, who's in Tennessee, and I knew that they had released this as well. And that's where I got the information. He said, yeah, it's going to be a slow rollout. It's going to take some time. Don't be in a hurry because change is hard.
Yeah. Interesting. Moving on. Number 4. RMLS fee simplification increase.
Yeah. So we don't shy away from the fact that dues went up. But in fact, the motivation wasn't, cash. Although to be perfectly honest, we hadn't raised our dues since 1992. So, find some other company that's able to live without raising their dues that long. So it was sort of long overdue for us to raise fees so that we could offer better services. And
remind us what they went from to, Kurt.
Well, so we went from a sort of a convoluted situation where we had two different pricing structures. If a broker chose option A, the subscribers would pay $35 a month, but the broker themselves would have to pay $100 a month. And that was sort of a holdover from a previous fee increase that we had back in 1991. The second option was that everybody in the office could pay $45 a month, and then the broker didn't supplement their income. It was just $45 a month and the broker pays nothing. And the problem that I had with that is when you're trying to expand the boundaries of a multiple listing service, you have to have a 5-second elevator pitch. How much does it cost to belong to your organization? Well, explaining those two fee structures was a pain in the ass, and I couldn't get through it, right? So I needed something simpler, and to be perfectly honest, everybody needed something simpler. You don't find any products out there in the marketplace, like a can of Coke or a gallon of milk, that takes 30 seconds to explain the two different ways you could pay for it. So we decided to go $47 a month for everybody across the board, and the broker no longer pays a fee, which brings us in line with the vast majority of other MLSs around the country that had dropped their sort of supplemental income long time ago.
So you really, for most people, how was it broken up before? Was it 50-50 or was it mostly the 45?
It had gotten pretty close to 50-50. So over time, we've been seeing the number of people that chose that option one, $35 a month with the $100 from the broker, had been decreasing and decreasing and decreasing every year to the point where we were pretty close to 50-50. And it was a foregone conclusion that at some point everyone was going to be the $45 a month.
Got it.
So we just used that as the base. And from that, it's a $2 a month increase.
Or $24 a year. Whereas for the people where the broker was paying $100 a month, they felt a little bit more of an increase.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Which is painful, but to be perfectly honest, as the first increase in 26 years, we didn't get a lot of kickback.
Yeah,
I think
I don't imagine you
that
did.
adds up to $144 over the course of an entire year. I think they'll be okay. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, and you guys are doing you guys are doing a few things over there with that money. So
We've got big stuff coming.
we'll give you some slack. Just kidding. Okay, here's probably one of the top two biggest. Well, the next three are all huge. Never mind. Let's just go through them. Number 3, coming soon, no showing status, and I have all sorts of questions about this and enforcement. And so you take it away first, Kurt, and then we'll go from there with questions and follow up.
All right. So the great thing I think about coming soon was that PMAR, the Portland Metropolitan Association of Realtors, asked me to come out and do a wrap up. It was the first time they'd ever asked me to do that. No one's ever asked me after a release. Traditionally, when releases are coming out, we have a lot of here's what's coming, questions and answers, and then it releases and we go silent. So I was forced into a situation where I had to put together some use case scenarios, and the statistics were fascinating on this. So in 2018, by the way, I should explain the coming soon status, just in case there's someone out there who hasn't heard about it and subsequently called and yelled at me about it, is supposed to be a short-term status before it goes active. It is optional. That is by far the most important aspect of any of it. No one has to enter in a listing as CSN. There's been a lot of people calling me crying, I don't want to do this. Well, don't. Please don't. In fact, please don't. The vast majority of people don't. At most, it's 21 days in which you're basically announcing to your fellow Realtor subscribers that I have a listing coming. Now, if you look at the numbers, the way that it's used most often is the average days that a listing stays in CSN status throughout the entire year was 6 days. So basically what people are saying is, hey, gang, next week, this property is going to be available to be shown. Get your buyers ready. And let's get some people through here. So 6 days isn't a lot. If you look throughout 2018, we had 3,537 listings start in the coming soon no showings category, and then sort of work their way through the life. So what is that? 3%, 3 point something percent of listings use the coming soon status. So it's certainly optional. Nobody has to do it. But I think 3,500 listings in a year proves that there was a need for this. People wanted to sort of pre-release their properties and let people know what this is under contract. It's going to be available, and we're going to have showings on X date.
Mm-hmm. Did you talk about the restrictions as a result of this release?
Yeah, so I haven't talked about it yet,
because I think that's probably as impactful as what you're doing to allow exposure. Also, the restrictions and some of the thought process behind that.
So the idea was that if we were going to do this, there were two camps of people when this task force got together. The first camp was people that wanted to be able to pre-release listings in some way or another. The second camp of people were those people that were really frustrated at the time with the pre-releases that were going on that were getting sold ahead of time. Now, it's erroneous. A lot of people have told me, well, you just did this to get rid of dual agency. That's not true. There's nothing illegal about dual agency. However, what was concerning to the multiple listing service is if you go back to let's say 2011, if you look at the database, there was about 520 listings that had 0 days on market, right? It wasn't a large portion of the listings, but there's always going to be some that have 0 days on market because that's how the world works. There's sometimes that happens. But you look at 2016, so 5 years later, and it was 2,650 listings had 0 days on market. That's thousands of listings that had no exposure, right? The deal got done before it was exposed to the entire marketplace. And that was the concern. That was what people were worried about, was look at all of these listings that are coming in, and I never had an opportunity to bring a buyer to that transaction. So when we released Coming Soon, we put some caveats around it. One, if you put it in as a CSN, you cannot market it on like Zillow or Realtor.com or any website at all. It's supposed to be a status where you're sharing this information with your counterparts, with your fellow realtors, but not necessarily with the consumer, right? You're not telling the consumer this is coming up. You're telling other realtors, get your buyers ready.
Yeah. Let me speak a little bit to this too. First of all, I love it, Kurt. I truly do. It was a big change for me, but I love it, and I'll tell you why. Not only in your scenario, to me it wasn't just about the listings that had 0 days on market. It was agents, bad actors, in my opinion, who were using it as bait out there.
Right.
And I have reason to believe sometimes they may not have even been legitimate listings. They were taking maybe their own personal residence, maybe, which would be kind of obvious to someone looking, but maybe they're taking their brother's house or a friend's house. It's in a desirable area. They're saying coming soon in 3 weeks, and they're just sitting back waiting for the phone to ring with consumers who, by the way, are people we're all trying to connect with. Right. But they're using this shady tactic to not only attract consumers and grow their business, but possibly take my buyers too.
Right.
Because my buyer then, who maybe I've been talking to, met at an open house or however, is online looking around. They go, oh, this is coming soon. Let me click on it. Suddenly their phone's ringing and that person's giving them a run, right. Hey, and I would venture they probably had some pretty good scripting that went something like, hey, that property's not available right now. There are some challenges going on with the seller. They're second guessing whether they want to even go on the market. But let me tell you what I do have. Can I come meet with you, or can we meet at this property? And that's kind of how they're going at it.
That's right.
Steve, it sounds like you might have did a little recon work here on some of these.
So I've had clients over the years do that. I had like a high school friend, believe it or not. She reached out to me and she said, and we set up a search for her, and I had a listing appointment. All of a sudden, and she told me, she goes, I think I'm going to meet with a couple other agents, Steve. I know I like you, but I want to just make sure I'm doing my homework. So I'm meeting with a couple agents. Well, a couple days later, she's telling me, hey, I found this house, and this was a legitimate coming soon, because it really did go on the market. But there were other stories that were more like the last scenario I ran by you. But this one, she had found this coming soon. It was out there for several weeks. She reached out to the agent. They were trying to hard press her into a listing appointment. And it was just obvious that this was their marketing platform. This was how they were generating leads, was putting these listings out there that they basically were, I don't know if they were the only ones that had it. They had a secret stash, and they were forbidding any other agents from it and using it to attract not only new consumers, but other people's consumers. Kurt, I want to tell you one thing. Since Coming Soon rolled out, it's very easy to do. You can go on Zillow, you put in Portland, Oregon, right, and then you remove all statuses but Coming Soon. It is getting better, by the way. In August of last year, I did it, and there were quite a few still. I want to say there was about 25 Coming Soons out there. And at one point, I even flagged a few and sent them and reported them to you guys.
Good.
I just did it again today, and there's actually only about 4 or 5.
Right.
One of them is the person that was notoriously doing this.
Yes, of course.
A year ago before the rule change, and I'll let you.
And that's important. It is getting better. And I think the bottom line needs to be that the multiple listing service is a cooperative. When everybody joins the MLS, they're not doing it, you get a lot of personal gain out of it, but it's a cooperative. You agree to share your listings in exchange for everybody else sharing your listings with you. What it is not is a secondary fallback just in case things don't work out on your own. Okay, then I'll try it through the MLS. That's not what you agreed to. And that's the bottom line.
Yep. Talk to us about enforcement. People are getting flagged? Have there been Have there been reports of, hey, that 123 Main Street is coming soon on Zillow?
Yeah, we get those. And by the way, I should say, when anybody hits the report issue button inside of RMLS Web, which of course this wouldn't be, or they call the rules and regs department or the help desk, all of that is entirely anonymous. The only time anyone ever knows that you complained is if we push it, we'll call you back and say, look, we need a formal violation here. But the default is an entirely anonymous report. So everybody who sees this sort of thing, feel free to send us in the information. We'll do the legwork. You don't have to do anything. We'll make the phone calls and no one will ever know that it was you. But yeah, we do get a fair number of people that are reporting either I found this on Zillow or which is also common, is I got this email, this person's trying to sell this property to people that are RMLS subscribers, but it's not in RMLS Web, I can't find it. And then we just track them down. And most of the time, I would probably say somewhere in the neighborhood of 90% of the time, it's not as big an issue as we originally thought it was. It's usually someone has the proper paperwork filled out, or they actually do have it in RMLS Web. The person couldn't find it, or it just got added 5 minutes ago or something like that. Most of the time, it's not a big deal. But those times that it is a big deal, we chase it down and we either get it entered into RMLS Web or, find out what the deal is.
Do you have people who are repeat offenders, and have you done anything about that yet? Because I'm looking at one right now.
You're gonna have to plus some kneecaps, huh?
So we do have people that are repeat offenders, and we haven't done anything about it yet. So the way that process works, and here's sort of the Achilles heel of any multiple listing service. You remember I just said no one's going to know who it is until I call you back and say, look, I need this to be a formal violation. And no one's willing to push it that far. As soon as we call them back and say, we need to press this on a formal violation, they say, I'm out. It's over. So you look at last year, I think we had 8 or 10 formal violations, if that many. When you're talking about tens of thousands of informal violations.
Okay, so I didn't understand that, Kurt. So in order for a repeat offender, like someone anonymously says, "Hey,
should we put this guy on blast, Steve? Do we want to? Should we just blast this guy on the show today? That'll be the formal.
I'll hang up immediately.
I won't say a name.
Please don't.
I'm kidding.
So if somebody does an informal anonymous 123 Main Street is coming soon on Zillow, and you look at it and you go, oh, it's so-and-so, and they do this all the time, you can't do anything unless that person does a formal violation.
That's right. Yeah. So what happens is that has to be brought to a hearings committee, and then the hearings committee has to go through and say, well, actually, it goes to the Rules and Regs committee. The Rules and Regs committee says, yeah, that is in fact a violation. Then we schedule a hearing, because the National Association of Realtors requires that anyone accused of something has the right to face their accuser. They have the right to be able to defend themselves in front of a jury of their peers. So we have a formal process we have to follow, because we're a realtor multiple listing service. And so we have to follow those rules. So in order for us to levy a fine, we have steps that we have to go through. And one of those is to remove the anonymity. And that's sort of the crux of the situation. No one's willing to do that at that point.
So do you think people, and now that, especially that you've put that out to the universe on a podcast, do you think people are taking advantage of that?
The anonymity?
Repeat offenders, do you think they go, oh, it's never going to turn into anything bad, so I'm just going to keep doing it?
It's possible, I suppose. It's not, I mean, honestly, when you look at the numbers, it's not, if that were the case, I would expect more people to do it. And I don't see that.
Yeah. So that said, you might not levy a fine, but you do reach out to that person. You do say, hey, 123 Main Street is on Zillow. You need to take that down?
Constantly. Yes.
Constantly. Okay.
Yes.
So that's kind of the governor to controlling this whole thing, really, is like, hey, you're in the wrong. And most normal people are like, sorry, yeah, we'll fix it. Right. You get your occasional repeat offender that's like, well, nobody's going to file formal complaints, so I'm just going to keep being, a little bit.
Yeah. Or the worst one that I've heard, which is a response, which is, hey, fine me. It's the cost of doing business. I'm just going to get it done. And that one drives me insane. But
and you heard
those are so small compared to the 99.x% of people that are like, whoopsie, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. And I agree with you that the vast majority, 99.9%, are either doing it right or accidentally doing it wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, going back to the CSN, that was the vast majority of people. They didn't realize what they were doing was in violation, and they hadn't even thought about it. They were just, going about their business. They're just doing their thing.
Yeah. I would venture then on your guys' end, the repeat offenders. Like, obviously, you're not going to say any names, but there are probably
names. But I would be surprised if there were any repeat offenders that we don't talk to routinely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, after this podcast, we'll talk about a name. So next one, number 2. We're getting close here to the number 1. SentryLock Bluetooth conversion. This one was huge. Talk about this, Kurt.
So, in essence, the RMLS board of directors took a look at the SentryLock product offerings. They saw that there was a Bluetooth version of the lockbox available, which eliminated access. There's a large portion of the state of Oregon. So if you're in Florence, a lot of these lockboxes that in order to use the app, you had to have cell coverage. That was a pain. Or up on Mount Hood, that could be a pain. And honestly, just in the day-to-day using of the product, the Bluetooth lockbox was significantly better. So the board of directors voted to spend about $3.2 million buying Bluetooth lockboxes for all of the subscribers. So we bought 50,000 Bluetooth lockboxes, and then over the course of about a month, exchanged the vast majority of those for the old lockboxes that we just gave back to SentryLock. We don't know what they're going to do with them. They don't know what they're going to do with them. But that was it. It was a huge undertaking. And you sort of alluded to this earlier in the podcast. A lockbox exchange is one of those things that a multiple listing service does once or twice. And it'll be something that they point to as their year's accomplishment. Like, this is what we did this year. In 2018, this was just one of a slew of things that we accomplished. We just happened to fit in a Bluetooth upgrade for everyone's lockbox in 2018. And it's been very popular. People love the Bluetooth lockbox compared to the old one.
Oh, my gosh. Hey, Tucker, I turned in 25 to 30 lockboxes. Guess how much it cost me?
0. Yeah, I know. We turned in a bunch too. I have a question for you, though, because on these new lockboxes, I've been asking Chris in our office here, we'll have any given listing with showings, and sometimes the showings show up automatically, but my understanding is that some people have to like reload their card or something in order for that showing to actually show up.
Right.
Is there some clarification there, or am I missing?
Yeah, so there's 2 ways to open up a lockbox now. You can use the app, which for the first time in history, the vast majority of our subscribers are using the app. Thank goodness. But some people still prefer, I don't know if it's because they want tactile feedback or they don't trust their phone or they don't have a smartphone, but some people still use the card. Now, the way that the lockbox works is that if you use that card, right, to open up a lockbox, there's no way for that card to tell anybody, anywhere, anytime that it opened up a lockbox. The only way the system gets that information is the next time they renew their card. So if that can take some time. So there can be, with card users, there can be a very long delay before that information gets uploaded to the system. Now, SentryLock has done a number of things to try and mitigate that, not the least of which is that the lockbox records the fact that a card was used, and the next time somebody uses an app, it broadcasts that. But you still have a delay there, right? You still have a gap, and that's sort of the problem with the system. If people continue to use that card, it's going to cause those delays. But it's fewer and fewer and fewer people every day.
Gotcha. How many use the card versus the app? Do you guys have any statistics on that, Kurt?
John has the statistics on that. I don't have them in front of me. I just know that in 2018, we crossed the 50% mark. So I think we're at like 58%, somewhere around there, that are using the app now. And it's growing every day.
Oh my gosh, I would have guessed a lot more than that. No kidding.
Yeah, I would have too.
Hey, Steve, we've done this show for a long time. How many realtors is it the first time they use Skype when we do the show with them?
I know. I know.
All right,
realtors, they don't love change. I just want to thank you personally, Kurt. I mean, again, you glossed over this. I just want to reiterate what you said. As Tucker acknowledged, I spent $0 to turn in my lockboxes. And by the way, get brand new lockboxes. Like some of those lockboxes were 5 years old and were falling apart and were embarrassing to me to have on my listings. For $0 and a very easy process, I now have brand new shiny lockboxes. RMLS paid $3.2 million. That's all. I mean, you just walk up to it, your app finds it, and you enter your little 4-digit code and it's opening. One thing for our listeners, I mean, you do have to push a button on the lockbox a lot of times. They'll be asleep, and for them to connect, you do have to do that. There's been a little bit of a learning process, but it is super, super easy to use. Kurt, one question I had with these lockboxes, if I pulled up my app right now, it would suddenly show about 10, 15 lockboxes near me. If I clicked on one and did the 4-digit code, do I have to be within 10 feet of it or something for it to actually open? Or can I open one from quarter mile away? That's not.
No, that's not possible. You'd have to be within Bluetooth range. So you couldn't. Now, if you were to try it and prove that it failed and you weren't able to do it, the listing agent would still get a notification that lockbox. So that's a little bit of a glitch.
Oh, even though it didn't open it.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I have a lockbox sitting in my office right here that every now and then someone attempts to open. And if they weren't here, they weren't attempting to open. It was just being used as a test.
Got it. And I'll tell you, that's happened on our listings. Sometimes you're trying to get feedback. We'll reach out to an agent and they'll go, I didn't show that listing. I think I showed a different one in that building or something.
Right.
So
yeah,
I guess my concern had been in the past was that lockbox opening and then anyone could use it. But I guess what you're saying is it's not. Unless they're within.
You've got to be right there.
Got it.
Within range.
Awesome.
Which is sort of, it's sort of interesting. That's one of the calls that we get a lot. I get it a lot, and I'm sure Help Desk does too, where somebody just showed my listing and you call them and they say, no, I wasn't showing the listing. I was showing another agent how easy the app is to use. And it's like, well, thank you.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, at least they're showing them, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You got that.
Okay. Tucker, drum roll. Number 1. Debut of a new look and feel for RMLS Web.
Right. So this will come as a surprise to no one, but for years we have been inundated with complaints about the look and feel of RMLS Web. And for years we kind of did nothing because our charter, like our directions, were to keep the MLS up and running at all times, which we do an excellent job of, and to keep the MLS as fast as possible. Nobody should be waiting for data. And we can still do more of that. But to be perfectly honest, compared to some of these other systems, RMLS Web is zippy fast. And so we've just been sort of accomplishing those two goals over and over and over. And it became relatively apparent at some point in 2017 that we needed to start redesigning this product. We need to make it look better. We need to make it something that people aren't complaining about all the time. And to be perfectly honest, nobody complains about an ugly website when it's down. They complain the fact that it's down. No one complains about an ugly website when it's slow. They only complain about an ugly website when it's up and it's zippy fast. But the fact remains they're still complaining. The problem with a redesign is there's no way you're going to redesign something and make everyone happy. Look at Facebook and their redesigns. Look at Reddit and their redesigns. Every time one of these major websites redesigns their system, they make their entire user base angry. In our case, we don't really have the flexibility to make everyone angry because we don't want to get in the way of your job. So we hired a UX UI designer to come in, take a look at RMLS Web, and help us sort of walk us through steps to make the website something that was made in 2018, while at the same time not disrupting anyone's business. That's my first rule. We can't get in the way of what it is you want to do, which kind of ties our hands to a certain extent. But that project was launched in 2018. And I land heavily on the word launched because I've had a lot of people call me and say, geez, you guys sure suck at a redesign. All you did was the login screen and the menu bar. And
That
it's
was
like,
nice
well,
of 'em. Yeah.
we're just started. And you'll see later, our next release will be Listing Load. Now, Listing Load is going to be a large redesign. It's going to look dramatically different. I'm hoping we don't get in anyone's way, which means that, there won't be too big of changes, but I think people will start to see, especially with Listing Load, people will start to see the direction that we're heading in as far as a redesigned website.
Awesome. I'm playing around with it right now as we talk, Kurt. And I love the search bar. I love being able to hit home. You've got your search bar there, and I was even playing around with it. You can enter the number of the street and then just even the first 3 letters of the street name.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it'll either pull up that street or that street and any other derivatives that are close to it.
Yeah.
But that was a huge addition to be able to have that. In the past, you had a little search in the right corner, right? Was it the same search or is it improved?
I'm sorry, that broke up at the end there. What was that?
In the past, before the redesign, there was a search bar in the right corner on the right-hand side.
Right.
It was small.
Well, it's the same search, but we're constantly refining the algorithm on the back end. So it works a little better. It's a little bit different because we took some of the code that we had on the old mobile product and we sort of wrapped that in. But for the most part, it's the same. I mean,
but it's much more pronounced now. And
and the thing that's important that I think is cool that a lot of people overlook is if you go to the toolbar and hit home, like that search bar is there. It's always available to you where it wasn't before, right? Exactly. You had to go back and load a whole separate page. And I think, little things like that coupled with the fact that this is significantly easier to use on a tablet because of the redesigned menu bar, I think comes in really handy.
Yeah. So Kurt, last comment on that subject. Mm-hmm. Do you remember when on Masters right after the redesign, somebody went on there and goes, there was some complaints like what's going on with RMLS Web and like you said, not everyone's ever always happy, and there was complaints. And one guy goes on there and goes, "We need a new president for RMLS."
I remember it? I think about it every day.
And you pop in there and you're like, oops, this is awkward.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what are you going to say?
I think we did a show a long time ago, Steve. We were like, before you rag on somebody, use the search bar within the group and see if they are actually in the group, right?
Make an attempt before you go replacing staff.
Yeah.
In other news, RMLS is never down other than one mysterious user who is constantly down every 3 days for 5 hours.
I know. There's always that one user.
I'm just kidding. Okay, so we're done with 2018. Talk to us about 2019.
Okay, so 2019
a little bit.
We have some cool stuff coming up, and I think so I can't go into detail on a lot of this because some of it hasn't been inked yet, and we're still working through. But I think maybe arguably the largest improvement that's coming is going to be the fact that RMLS is signing an agreement with Brokers Public Portal, which people call BPP. BPP uses HomeSnap, and HomeSnap is not only a website, but also an app that you get. The Brokers Public Portal is supposed to be sort of the industry's response to Zillow and Realtor.com. It's a portal that realtors can get behind, that brokers can get behind. We can direct our clients to without having people sell leads to us, without having them charge the MLS fees, without having them do a lot of the shenanigans that people hate about the largest portals. Now, what is that going to mean to you? What is it going to mean to the subscriber? What it means is that at some point in 2019, sooner rather than later, we are going to turn off our public website, rmls.com, and we will direct all of that traffic to homesnap.com. So if people go to homesnap.com, you'll have a much more what I would call 2018 experience, as opposed to what we were able to get accomplished with RMLS.com.
So
and that's for a multitude of number of reasons. It's not because we're bad programmers. It's what people could stomach, right? Mm-hmm. Now, in addition to that, HomeSnap has a very robust client portal feature. So you'll get a HomeSnap app that you can use, and that app will allow you to have sort of two-way communication with your clients. They loved this house, they hated this house, they had a question about this house, that type of thing. And you can provide that to them just sort of as a tool that you get from the multiple listing service. Now, none of this comes cheap. It is outrageously expensive to the multiple listing service, to the tune of $1 per subscriber per month, which means that in order to provide this, it's costing RMLS $14,500 every single month, but which is one of the reasons we had to raise our dues. But I think it will speak to two problems we've had for a while, and that was that people were getting more and more and more embarrassed of our public website, and people were looking for a client, some sort of client portal, and this will address that.
Wow, that's interesting. That goes against what you guys typically do. Usually you guys are very broker facing. Yes. This is a little different in that you are actually coming up with consumer facing tools to help us.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. No, I think that's fantastic. I think it's great. And I think it's good because I would agree that RMLS, what's the consumer one called again? RMLS Web?
No, it's just RMLS.com.
RMLS.com.
Yeah, it's a beauty.
It wasn't the user experience that the consumers want, and it wasn't getting the traction against the big, like you said, the big portals. So
well, sure, yeah. Like I was at Safeway not too long ago. Well, golly, it was over a year ago, and I had someone come up, just a member. I had my RMLS jacket on, and I had a member of the public come up and say, God, we use your website all the time. We love it. And I think this lady had to be in her mid 80s, lower 90s, maybe. And two things occurred to me. One, I haven't received that compliment since like 2002. It used to be all the time you wore your logo and the consumer was like, oh, I know you guys. And I realized I hadn't heard that in a while. And then I thought, this is who finds the website so easy to use? And so, and I think, and I'm not alone. I mean, to be perfectly honest, there's a reason this is called the broker's public portal. I think the brokers themselves were like, okay, it's time to stop hamstringing our multiple listing services and start to embrace a client side portal. Awesome.
What else you got coming our way, Kurt?
Oh, there's some big stuff. So speaking of portals, as it stands right now, RMLS only sends data to one portal. Well, two if you count RMLS.com, but that's just sort of our public website. We only send data to Realtor.com. And in 2018, one of the things we did was we focused on that question. Why? Why do we send data only to Realtor.com, especially given that they're not affiliated with NAR anymore? I mean, they rent the name Realtor, but they're not owned by Realtor.com. And as a portion of that, we came out with a checklist of things that our directors would like to see from portals. Things like they don't charge the MLS and they don't charge for listings and they the real estate agent, and they provide statistical reports and a whole slew of things that they wanted. And what we found was that Realtor.com still fit the bill. They still were someone that we should be sending data to. But for the first time since like 2003 or 2 or something, we will be adding to that list, and we will be adding Homes.com. Homes.com has long been known as the most MLS-friendly portal out there. And we will, by default, be sending everyone's listings to Homes.com probably second quarter of 2019.
How many other MLSs send them their info? Quite a few as well? Or?
I don't know about quite a few. It's over half.
Okay.
But at this point, Homes.com is in fourth place. So you've got the big Z at the top, Realtor.com close at number 2, and then you've got Trulia and, Homes.com.
And that's in our market, Kurt?
Well, boy, I don't know. Good question. That's right. Those are nationwide stats I was quoting.
Yeah, because I think Redfin's bigger in our market than I think it's up there.
Well, it's entirely possible, but remember, I don't consider Redfin a portal. They're a broker.
Yeah,
so I put them in a whole separate category.
That's true.
They're one of my customers.
Yeah. So explain to us explain to us what you mean by that, because it's a little confusing to me, because you do feed Zillow. Now, I know as a brokerage, we have to agree to it, but when we do, you do send your data to Zillow. So why is that different?
Okay, so here's the difference. In order for you to get your listings on Zillow, the principal broker has to call us. They have to authorize it. They have to sign some paperwork. And then we have to set up a special feed where we send them only that broker's listings, right? This is different. This is a board-approved feed, which means that everybody's listings automatically are going to show up on homes.com unless you do exactly the same thing. You call us and you say, I don't want my listings on homes.com. I don't like them for whatever reason. And then we will alter the feed to remove those listings. It's the difference between an opt-in and an opt-out.
Got it.
Everybody is opt-in except for realtor.com and homes.com. And
so,
RMLS.com if you want to count them.
Is that a good, what's your thought process here? I mean, okay, so let me ask you some silly question. If 1 is good, 2 is better, is 3, 4, 5, and 6 even better? I mean, what?
Yeah, so that's the super question. Like, that's a really good question. You know what's good for your listings. Like, I'm not going to make decisions on what's best for you and your listings. On the other hand, we do have the ability to leverage some things on behalf of all of the subscribers. So for instance, if more exposure is better for you, that's kind of up to you to decide, right? If I were to go through and send all of your data to Field and Stream magazine and everybody who's asking for the data, that's how MLSs get in trouble. And you've got, by the way, hundreds of them all over the country that are getting in trouble for that all the time, because brokers wake up one day and they realize my listings are everywhere and these guys are profiting off of it and I didn't know anything about it. Why is that? Oh, well, the MLS was making the decision on their behalf. On the other hand, sometimes when there are websites like realtor.com back in the day, like they were owned by the National Association of Realtors, and it meant something to the board of directors that we supported that website. And that's exactly the same thing with homes.com. They're trying to be industry friendly. They're trying to give you all the services that you might need. And there's really no reason for us not to help out by providing that level of exposure. But we can't support websites that charge you money, right? So I'm not mentioning anyone in particular, but like Zulia, for instance. Like, they make a ton of money off of your content, and it would be relatively inappropriate if we just helped them make more money by providing your data to them.
Realtor.com charges money to agents.
That's right. They do.
So how's that different?
You know, honestly, we could talk about this for 6 weeks.
Is that just because it's grandfathered in because it used to be owned by NAR?
To a certain extent, yes. I mean, I won't shy away from the fact that at this point right now, it would be significantly harder for us to cut that feed than it would just to leave it alone. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Imagine 14,000 realtors trying to explain how we cut their feed for one reason or another.
Yeah. I want to get you on record, Kurt. Mm-hmm. I know you've heard about this. Las Vegas is removing Zillow's feed at all across the board, which I also believe Seattle's Northwest MLS doesn't feed Zillow. Do you think that's a movement in that direction? Do you think the MLSs are saying, "Hey, wait a minute, we don't want to play with you anymore"?
Yeah, so that's tough. That's hard. So Las Vegas went ahead and rescinded. They're sending data again.
Oh, they did. They are. Oh,
and Seattle does as well. So let's let that play out for a second. Here's how this works. MLS takes a strong stand. We're not sending listings to you anymore, right? We're just not going to do it. And Zillow has said in the past, well, we won't accept listings except from multiple listing services, which I actually support. I think that's a good move. But in that situation, what happens is then the consumer starts screaming at you Why isn't my listing on Zillow? Where is it? And the MLS all of a sudden starts getting the reverse pressure of phone call after phone call after phone. You're affecting my business. You're affecting my relationship with my client. And what happens? It's only a matter of days, and then boom, this feeds back on, and lesson learned.
Yeah.
I think we're in a weird situation right now where a lot of people have a lot of anxiety towards Zulia and the big boys, where at the same time, the consumer, they've attracted the consumer's eyes. They have the attention. And, the time for MLSs to turn off that feed probably has passed. We could have gotten away with it at some point. And for those MLSs that made the decision on behalf of their subscribers, woe unto them. Just woe unto them. And there's a lot of them. But for MLSs like us, where it was always the broker's responsibility to turn that on, well, it was their decision and they did it. And if they want to turn it off, and they do, routinely we get phone calls of people saying, shut it off, turn it back on, shut it off, turn it back on. And that's fine. They're in control.
And I'm with you. Like I hear brokerages saying, "Oh, we're gonna ours off luck." I mean, I get calls from sellers complaining about the stuff on Zillow, not showing up there, but they'll call and say, "Why is this? Why is that? Why is my days on market one day off or something?" And I'm like, I don't own Zillow. I can't.
Right.
But that's my point is consumers are looking on those sites and they making sure their home for sale is on them. So I think the term I've heard used in the past is the genie is out of the bottle.
That's right.
Try to stuff it back in and pretend that you can do that and relevant is hard to imagine.
Yeah, someone out of there.
It's a good way to put it. Well, hey, we're coming up on about an hour and 15 here, so maybe we should wrap it up. I know we
probably should.
Kurt's time, but I think we've gone over some great information, definitely from last year. Very cool stuff coming forward this year. Conversation about Zillow, the milk being out of the cow. It's a good analogy. Since it's very relevant to conversations these days. Zillow and real estate listings. It's a hot button for sure. So I'm glad we touched on it. But we really appreciate you coming back on, Kurt, and diving through everything. I know. You got your busy schedule as we all do, so we very much appreciate it, and I know our listeners do too.
Yeah, and Kurt, we had more stuff to go through. I think I vote that, Tucker, we get them on in 6 months again, maybe in the summertime, and maybe talk a little bit more about where things are with 2019. And we had some other stuff to discuss. But you're always engaging, and you're an interesting guest for sure, Kurt. And I know our listeners are going to love this episode. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much. The only thing I would add is if anyone is interested in some short podcasts about RMLS releases and about RMLS information, just do a search on whatever tool you use, iTunes or whatever, for RMLS. We do have a podcast, but again, it's 5 minutes. So it's something you listen to on the way to your next gig or whatever it is you're doing. But as far as this one goes, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And I honestly look forward to doing it again.
What's the name of the podcast so that people can search for?
I just search for RMLS. I think it's the name of the podcast is RMLS Real Talk.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, definitely listen to it. It'll cut down on your help desk calls too.
I hope so. Yeah, that'd be great.
So, all right, guys. Well, this is episode 92. We're signing off. Thanks, Kurt. And
thank you.
Thanks, Steve, for joining myself for episode 1 of 2019. And everybody, we'll be back soon.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks again for listening to our show, and make sure to tune in next week for another great episode of the Portland Real Estate Podcast.